Okay, thank you for, we're back from recess. Thank you for your patience, for those that have stayed to finish the hearing. So we left off with talking about footprints and regarding the A23, A25 wells. So we don't have a setup right now, so we're just going to try to focus in on the map. So if we can continue that discussion, as far as A23, A25 wells, Dr. Jensen, can you just highlight possible footprints where, if we're considering that PFAS is mobile, how would it flow within that subbasin?
Well, let me start by giving a little bit of background. The flow pathways in this aquifer are complex because it's a karst aquifer. There are three types of permeability. What we call matrix permeability, which is the intergranular permeability, and then there are fractures through that, and there are conduits and cave systems that have formed around some of those fractures. So the plumbing can be complex, and the contribution that Weary can make to the discussion here is that our work can help identify the mobility, the persistence, the pathways, and the responses to natural phenomena such as rainfall. And one of the interesting things that came out of the study with the A25 contamination levels was that after heavy rain, it goes up. But it takes about a month before it goes up. And when it's dry, it decreases. So we don't know what's going on down there. And we learn more about the plumbing in the aquifer by studying those sorts of things. But it's a process of elimination. You have to understand the system and the other thing that stands out is that these the history of the responses of these wells is different, even though A23 and A25 are fairly close to one another, but they show a difference in contamination levels and difference in behavior. So let me refer to...
So there are two hypotheses. So groundwater generally flow from Aganya Height toward Aganya Basin. So that means if PFOS is impacted in Aganya Height area, then that's a reasonable assumption. PFOS, by high rainfall event, then PFOS is dissolved and migrate toward well A25. But based on hydrogeologic analysis in ponding swamp area, so actually hydraulic gradient is very low. That means depending on tide effect, or if pump is operating, then there is a water drawdown in the well. Then there can be some reversed groundwater flow from Aganya swamp or Aganya mole area toward well A25. So based on two hypotheses, we are approaching how to find contamination site. But based on the analysis of PFOS level at well A25, there should be PFOS contamination sites. So right now we don't know whether there is only one or two or multiple contamination sites, but there should be around well A25.
Yeah, see, it's made further complicated by the fact that there could be more than one source or more than one location, which could have been deposited at different time in the history. You know, this goes back decades, and there could be one source that's mobilized when there's a heavy rainfall, and then it sits there and doesn't do anything, and then another source that is somewhere else and is responsive to the reverse hydraulic gradient when you're pumping. And that can change when the tide level changes. It can change when if there's a long dry period and the gradient shifts a little bit, it's gets very complicated.
So if you can just talk about the details of that study. So what sites were sampled in that study?
Yeah, we chose 2 points of source, GWA wastewater pump station near Chout River, and the other site was Korean air crash site. So we didn't find any PFAS from Korean air crash site based on just one-time sampling. And in case of GWA wastewater pump station, we found a sewage hole next to this pump station, and we found a high level of P4. So P4 level was 6 microgram per kilogram. And yeah, from other non-point sources, actually, we collected samples from Chout River, Ponte River, and 4 Aganya ponding basins, and then so near contaminated sites, well, for example, stormwater drainage in front of McDonald's, and then there is also a parking lot for Guam Auto Spot. So we collected some samples from there, and also we collected sediment sample from Aganya Swamp and Aganya River. So based on, after collecting all samples, we shipped this sample to University of Rhode Island, and they analyzed all this contamination. And the result was from the one Chout River, we found the PFOS level up to 4.3 microgram per liter, and the other site was one, as I mentioned before, one ponding basin in Aganya High. The level was 4.7 microgram per kilogram.
So you found it so it can potentially support your first hypothesis that it's coming from.
Some ponding basin. One ponding basin just behind well A25.
Okay.
Yeah, that's my hypothesis, but like I said before, it was just one-time sampling, so we need to do more research to confirm.
So that's interesting because you found PFOA, but in the water wells that were tested positive, it's PFAS.
Right.
And PF.
Yeah. That's also
HXS.
my interesting, because we haven't tested using wastewater before. So, but what we can assume is when wastewater was leaking over 10 years ago, wastewater might flow toward Chout River, so it may affect, but we don't know exactly why PFOA was detected from the sample right now.
Were the other chemicals detected as well, like PFAS, PFHXS?
Yes, from GWA wastewater pump station, PFHXS was detected, and the level was 5.5 microgram per kilogram.
Yeah, there seems to be an inconsistency because the wells didn't test positive for PFOA, but then we're seeing that in your soil testing or your
Right.
sampling, but then we don't see PFAS, which we see in the water.
Right.
But we do see both
P4,
in
right.
both sources PFHXS.
Right.
So that's another mystery I think that needs to be solved as far as the source and that's something that needs to be.
Once you start digging into this, it becomes more and more complicated.
Is there a connection as far as breakdown product between PFHXS and PFAS?
Yes, can you say again?
Is there a connection as far as breakdown of PFAS into perfluorohexane sulfonic acid?
Well, actually, so there are two different groups, perfluoroalkyl acid and perfluoroalkyl sulfonate. So that means the terminal group is different. So usually, many researchers conducted about the breakdown study, and then the final many researchers say PFOA and PFOS are the final product of the breaking down from higher carbon molecular. Yeah.
Okay, so it's the terminal product, but what
Right.
about perfluorohexane sulfonic acid? What is their
Actually,
lineage?
based on carbon chain, the PFHXS has 6 carbon chains. That means number of carbon chains are lower than PFOS. That means PFOS can break down further, but based on research, fluorine and carbon bond are very strong. So we don't know exactly whether this chemical also came from the original product or the result of breaking down from other chemicals.
PFHXS has less carbons than PFOS?
Sorry?
PFHXS has less carbons than PFOS?
Right.
So it's potential that could potentially be a breakdown product
Right.
from PFOS?
Right.
Okay, but there's no studies to show that?
Yeah, I haven't read many papers about this research. Yeah, mostly so far, many researchers have focused on PFOS and PFOR, but these days, yeah, researches are turning to other PFAS chemicals.
What can you tell us about PFAS and its interactions with the environment? Does it aggregate with let's say, soil easily, or just it pretty much flows with water?
Yeah, based on my basic understanding about the organics, PFAS are easily interact with organic soil. So what I assume is the rich organic soil are in ponding basin or some river channels. So these sediment can be a good source of holding these chemicals. But in case of limestone, I don't think limestone has a high capability of holding these organic chemicals. But yeah, we need to conduct more research on that.
So what are your recommendations for testing PFAS in the environment?
Well, so far I have collaborated with the University of Rhode Island. Currently, the sampling method is to collect a water sample or sediment sample, and after taking this sample, then using the chemical instrument, they analyze. And in case of soil samples, they extract using solvent and then analyze using LC mass spec. But what where we is collaborating with the University of Rhode Island is they are developing some field PFAS samplers. So right now we are testing these samplers on Guam, but we haven't got any result. But eventually, if we have to measure PFAS concentration from some environment like river channel or a ponding basin, then we can apply that technique to Guam.
So what are the challenges for gathering information regarding PFAS? I know we kind of touched upon this.
Right. So I mentioned before, we always conduct research based on the open resources. So otherwise, if local agencies or federal agencies don't open any information, then we can't utilize that kind of information. So yeah, actually that's the kind of limitation, right?
Let me add that I think one important constraint is the fact that we have to send these samples off island and pay $500 to $1,000 for the testing. And were we to expand the laboratory at Weary and be able to add the additional instrumentation and staffing, which we are just right now writing into our strategic plan, we would be able to process that stuff right here on the island with our own local talent and labor, and that would be a big step forward
Right.
in just contributing to the volume of material that we could
Yeah,
covered.
for 2 years we have conducted this research, but so getting analysis data from off-island, that was the most difficult part. So for example, although I have collaborated with the University of Rhode Island, but depending on their schedule, so data could be delayed. So the best option to foster PFAS research is to set up the LC mass pad on lab on Guam, then we can actively conduct PFAS research.
Thank you very much. Sorry, do you have any further questions, Senator Chalahi? No. Okay. Thank you very much for being here and for your testimony.
Yeah.
So if I can call back Administrator Walter Leon Guerrero, I have a question actually regarding bottled water. If you can, is there any attempts to standardize testing of bottled water in the U.S.? And what are some of the challenges of testing bottled water?
So for the consumable bottled water that you buy at the store, the small ones, even the gallon ones that aren't processed on Guam, we do not have any regulatory authority. I believe maybe public health might have. For the facilities that actually use Guam water and bottle that, we have started our sanitary surveys into their facilities to make sure, trying to ensure that they are providing safe and drinkable water. We weren't doing that in the past, and we just started it up in the last 3 years for the small bottling companies of local water.
Is PFAS going to be tested?
Unfortunately, I will take the blame. I've not had that mandated yet, and I will do that when we move forward.
So by setting a maximum contaminant level, would that pretty much require that be done?
Again, Senator, instead of using the word MCL, I would prefer to use the term regulatory level, and we could enforce it as an MCL. But just to use the term MCL, I do not think would be appropriate. But we can do a regulatory goal or regulatory level, which would serve the same purpose as what an MCL does, until we have the validated data to actually say this should be the MCL. Yes.
Right. Yeah, thank you. I think that's, I'm sorry, Senator Chalahi, do you have any questions? All right, thank you again for coming back. Have a great day. So I would like to call up at this time Guam Airport Authority, International Airport Authority, and also Guam Fire Department. Thank you for staying, and we're finishing up our hearing. So for the record, we did ask Department of Defense. We invited them to come to this hearing. We did provide them questions in advance. They did respond, and that would be a part of the record. So we're going to proceed with questionings of our local entities, and with the idea, with the intention that, about identifying what the origins, the uses, and management of PFAS in order to reduce exposure to our community. So we're going to start with the airport. If you can identify, before you speak, I appreciate if you can identify your name, yourself, and your position at the airport. So we'll start from my far left, which is the far right of the table.
Ray Santos, and I'm a assistant fire chief with the Airport Fire Department. My name is Paul Packbeer. I'm the president for PCR Environmental, local environmental consulting company, and consultant to the Airport Authority. I'm a chemical engineer by education. 33 years ago in the not-so-great state of New Jersey, I got my degree. I've been almost 30 years on Guam. I've been running the NES-1 treatment system for the airport for approximately 15 years. We've been implementing long-term monitoring for groundwater underneath Tiedzen to look for contamination there.
Good afternoon, Senator. I'm John Knatz. I'm the Deputy Executive Manager for the airport.
Okay, thank you for being here. So I'm going to ask a series of questions, and you can respond separately, of course. So my concern is the use of firefighting foam that contains PFAS. So to your understanding, or to your knowledge, what was the origin of these firefighting foams that was used, or sorry, have you used these compounds, or are they in your inventory currently?
Yes, they are.
Okay. And how far back has it been used, and what types? Has it changed in the period of time? Because there has been changes to the formulations, and so what type of firefighting foam did you use and are currently using?
So since 1995, since GIA first took over NAS, it's been the original mil-spec form of AFFF, which was the longer chain of the fluorochemical. Within the last 6 years, I suppose, the FAA had referred to a shorter chain mil-spec, which is enviro-minded. And from that point on, we've been using that particular version.
And so with the older legacy foam, it's PFAS. Did it contain PFAS? Just to clarify, the first foam that you used in 1995, did it contain PFAS?
Yes. In order for foam to be considered film forming, it's got to have the PFAS in it.
Okay. And do you still have that in your inventory?
Not the legacy. We're up and as far as majority of the foam would be the new mil-spec.
So is that the modern version? The modern.
Yes,
Okay.
the C6 version. So
Okay.
If I may add, all the manufacturers are going towards the shorter chain PFAS. However, the manufacturing facilities are the same. They don't tear down a factory to start a new process. This particular group of chemicals, we're looking at extremely low levels, parts per trillion. Industry thinks that we're going to find larger PFAS and PFOA chains even in the newer generation foams for probably years to come. So yes, we're using an environment-minded formula right now, but there's probably going to be some molecules of the older stuff still in there before it gets out of the system industry-wide.
Okay. And through that time period, has your management of using this foam, say of management and disposal, has the procedures changed since 1995?
well, as far as disposal, we don't dispose of foam. Foam is discharged on an annual basis for testing. And particularly, it's hard to keep it in inventory to keep it to the level to where the FAA requires us to have it. So disposing of it is not a thing that we do. Buying foam on an annual basis is only to replenish what we use for testing. So
So when you test, you're releasing it. Where is it released?
it's discharged into the environment,
So outside on the
on the ground.
ground.
Yes.
Okay. And so there hasn't been any type of procedures as far as to contain it when it's discharged?
No. We don't have the capability to contain it. Like it said, it's an emerging chemical, and the environmental issues have not been brought to light to just recently. So as far as us keeping it to a point to where we contain it has not been an issue.
So we are looking into, so the airport has requirements, FAA promulgated ones, mandated ones. You know, we're a certified airport, they have to use this foam, there's no other option available. As far as stormwater management and infiltration into the ground, because it's an emerging chemical, not necessarily contaminant at this point, we're looking into different ways, how can we meet the testing requirements, the mandated requirements, as well as keep this family of chemicals from entering our environment at this point. There's some equipment retrofitting that may be able to be installed on some of the fire engines that would eliminate the need to discharge the foam onto the ground, and the airport is pursuing that. And then otherwise, when there is a need to use the foam during an accident, to how can we, as best as possible, contain it and recover it, and then possibly drum it and ship it off island. So we're looking at what's referred to as best management practices in the industry.
Okay, that's great. So you're working on improving your practices as far as containing. How much of the volume has been discharged? Can you estimate how much has been discharged into the environment over the period of time?
Each vehicle is tested to a certain discharge rate, and each vehicle discharges about 1,000 gallons of product. However, to put it into perspective, only 3% of that is AFFF, because it's discharged at a proportion rate of 3%. So the concentrate in that 1,000 gallons would be only 3%.
And how often is that done?
It's an annual testing.
Once a year?
Yes.
Okay, so, and as far as volume is concerned, what is that? How many fire
3,000
trucks?
gallons.
3,000 gallons
Yes.
a year?
Yes.
And when did you...
3,000 gallons of foam.
Foam.
Yeah, so
But-
not, and then 3% of that, so 90 gallons of AFFF,
Yes.
basically.
So what year was the legacy foam discontinued in use?
The original version.
Yeah, I don't know the year. I know that, again, the shorter chain that's being brought online now, as Captain here mentioned, started bringing that in 8 years ago.
Yeah.
That's industry-wide. There's about 49,000 airports in the world that use AFFF. However, AFFF is, and the 3% number keeps coming up, but only 3% of all PFAS manufactured are used for AFFF. So 97% of PFAS chemicals end up in other types of products, like consumer products that we use every day.
How important is it to, is there a way to minimize the amount of releases when you're doing the annual trainings, as far as, is there a move to reduce that amount?
There's like he was saying, from this point forward, there's this new tester called an input-based tester, which involves no foam. So from this point on, we should be able to test our systems without discharging any kind of foam at all. So it'll be measuring water as a medium versus what was foam before.
It's good to hear. Would you be able to identify any drains or ditches or ponding areas that might have migrated upon discharge?
The airport has two very distinct stormwater management systems. The terminal, what we call North Tietzen, and as well as East Sunset Boulevard, the runways there, they pretty much all, the drain water collects and gets discharged into the Harmon Sink. If you go down Airport Road towards Marine Drive, this big ditch on the side of the road, that's the storm drain for the airport. That system is permitted by US EPA under the NPDES system. We talked about that with the waterworks before. The South Tietzen site, where ARF is that area is mainly serviced by ponding basins in conjunction with underground injection control wells. So when stormwater flows through ditches to larger areas for water, allowing the water to percolate down, and then into actual wells that have been drilled down to about 100 feet below surface level to increase percolation rate. So that's South T's inside. So we know pretty much every single storm drain, catch basin, drainage area, and it's all well mapped out and laid out, yes.
If we were to clean up those areas, how do you see that taking place?
So the exposure pathway for PFAS, or some of the PFAS, is mainly through drinking water. I mean, that's the largest potential risk. And so that's groundwater that's produced as drinking water. And of course, we have NES 1 well. And then the airport has 3 additional production wells, one of which have been taken offline for a long time. Fortunately, because of previous contamination at the airport caused by the Navy at that time, TCE and PCE, to solvents, chlorinated solvents. The NES system has been operating through a GAC, granulated activated carbon treatment system, and the new production wells were built with a treatment system. So all groundwater is treated prior to becoming drinking water. So the question is, knowing that there are areas where AFFF has been discharged, there may be remnants of these chemicals in the soil. These chemicals are very different from any other contaminant that we as an industry have been tracking, tracing, mitigating for years. It adheres to certain soils. It's soluble in water, although it's also very resistant to water and oil. It moves really fast, but then also sticks around for a very long time. So are we going to focus on trying to dig soils out and ship them off island? Or are we going to look at what is the risk and keep treating the groundwater and basically do what's referred to as a pump and treat as a remedial effort?
Do you have any procedures as far as disposal or emptying out holding ponds, tanks, or other containment areas regarding PFAS?
So I'm guessing you mean if ponding basins were sampled, or the sediment, and if PFAS were identified, how to remove those?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
correct. How would you?
At this point, the only way really would be dig it out and haul it away. And hauling it away would, either you move it to a permanent solid waste facility on Guam, landfill, hard fill area, or you would have to ship it off island. Those are the only 2 options.
Thank you. What is the status of your investigation? There was a July 8, 2019 article in the Post about there was a barrel that was shown to have dumped some sort of chemical in the storm drain. What is the status of that and the response? Or what actions are being taken currently?
Ma'am, that's still ongoing with EPA, so that is still an ongoing investigation. It has not been closed yet.
But the airport did meet with EPA, and we believe it wasn't foam or chemical necessarily being disposed. It was at most it was a drum, an empty drum that's kept on hand to store the AFFF when needed. But it was used to store water for training purposes, and that water was drained into that drain. And unfortunately, it appears that it had some AFFF remnants in it. Unfortunate, not a huge risk issue, because there wasn't a lot of product in that particular drum.
Okay. thank you. So we'll be hearing from EPA about the results of that. Okay. Are you in the process of examining and developing an action plan for transitioning to non-fluorinated foam in anticipation of the requirement under the 2018 FAA Reauthorization Act?
So because of that Reauthorization Act, it's October of 2021 to where the FAA would start referring to a PFO-free foam. And until then is when we would start transitioning to it. To our knowledge, with the communication with the supplier for our foams, it's a challenge because the whole world is looking at purchasing it now. However, when the FAA does mandate it, we will comply, and the entire inventory would have to be swapped out.
Do you have any estimated costs as far as cleanup is concerned regarding this chemical, or even replacement of what do you have in stock to this non-fluorinated foam?
There isn't even a value on it yet. That's how new it is. However, a barrel of the stuff that we have could be anywhere from $1,500 to $2,000 depending upon the time. So we don't know what it's going to be with the non-PFO foam.
And then the treatment of the groundwater at this point, which Guam Water Works is operating, the wells for the airport authority, they are incurring that cost at this time for the GAC replacement. So whenever the carbon gets used up, new carbon has to be put in it, and then the old carbon has to be taken someplace. So at this point, that's being borne by Guam Water Works as a cost for operating the system. There have been talks between the airport and the Navy for historical use of AFFF, and the Navy has pretty verbally committed that they will assist in some of the costs for the treatment of the groundwater.
Is there potential to do, filtering of the ponding basins? So before it even gets to the wells, has that been studied or at least looked into?
No, and we don't know if the ponding basins are a source for contamination of the groundwater, because we don't shoot foam into the ponding basins. So the AFFF or the PFAS chemicals may never make it to the ponding basin. It may get absorbed into soil and make their way down to groundwater that way. So it's not just one particular source.
I think it's important that you are actually working towards non-releasing this chemical, and there's a move to phase PFAS out. I think that would definitely help, considering it's very impervious surfaces that we're dealing with, and it's connected. A lot of these areas are connected, so I think that's very important. And in light of the recent article, I think it's important to look at improving, ways in which these chemicals are managed, as we're currently using them. So I look forward to hearing more updates on this and seeing improvements in the system. I'd like to pass. Any questions? Okay. All right. So thank you. I think that's all for Guam Airport Authority. Thank you very much. So last but not least, definitely not least, Guam Fire Department. So we had sent questions to the Chief Stone prior, and my understanding is that you were not made aware of these questions ahead of time.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Guam Fire Department, Chief Manabusan, Fire Marshal,
Yes,
and
thank you.
the Acting Fire Chief. And go ahead and ask me questions, and I'll answer them to the best of my ability.
Okay, great. So basically, the similar questions that I've asked of Airport Authority. So are you currently using any of the firefighting foams that contain PFAS?
At this time, we
At
do
this
not keep AFFF on inventory. However, in the event there's a fire that involves hazardous substances and hydrocarbons, we do use AFFF, and the way we basically get it, donations from the federal government, or any other organization on Guam that is willing to give us. At this time, we do not have any on inventory, and we don't have any on our vehicles.
Okay, so from this discussion, there was a move away from PFAS-containing chemicals. Is your agency, you just mentioned that you get donations. Are there procedures in place to scrutinize what type of chemicals are being donated?
That is a very good question. At this time, as we've been seeing, based on discussions and the research has been shown and the presentations that you also provided, the industry out there, the AFFF that is being used does contain the PFAS, and there is a movement in the industry to reduce the amount and to find substitute foam to replace the more hazardous versions of AFFF. So at this time, there is a movement in the industry that also includes the fuel industry, the aircraft rescue and firefighting industry, and the overall firefighting industry for structural firefighting. So that's the best answer I can give, ma'am. There is a movement. It's being recognized now. As a result of being assigned to come down here, I started research last night myself, and I found that the industry is being looked at, and it's known now that they contain ground contaminants, and the advisories are out.
So just to clarify, will the Guam Fire Department accept foam that has PFAS in it?
Well, at this time, the best answer I can give you is we use the best foam that is recommended for effectively fighting any whatever particular type of hazard that we're facing. At this given time, AFFF is the most effective means of fighting hydrocarbon fires. And for the most part, that is our largest hazard on Guam at our ports of entry, having the fuel that is coming in, the raw fuel that's also converted to gasoline and treated here on Guam and sold out in the industry. AFFF is the most efficient way. Now they are looking into better ways of fighting these type of fires and replacing them. And there are best management practices that was discussed earlier on minimizing the use of AFFF for training purposes. The majority of the AFFF
Sorry, if I can interject here.
Sure.
The question was, will Guam Fire Department accept PFAS-containing foam?
Will we accept it?
Yes, if it's a donation.
Yes, we accept it, but it has to be properly stored, and we don't use it. We only use it for emergency firefighting if we do get it, unless there's a law that says that we cannot use it or store it.
So we just heard from our colleagues here that they're using the modern ones that don't have PFAS.
Yes.
So what you're saying is that Guam Fire Department will accept PFAS-containing foam?
Actually, ma'am, they mentioned that the modern foam does contain PFAS, but a shorter chain PFAS. It's still hazardous. Is that correct? So the modern AFFF does still contain PFAS, but a shorter chain version. And the industry today, I would like to say that most of the industry now does use the modern shorter chain version of PFAS.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I need to clarify. So the PFAS that I'm mentioning is perfluorooctanoic,
Yes.
perfluorooctane sulfonic
Yes, ma'am.
acid. So you're saying you're using that foam currently?
Sorry, I think it may be, so the difference is PFOS or PFAS.
Yes.
So PFAS is the chemical.
Right.
PFOS is the longer chain, one of the longer chain ones that is currently being minimized.
So are you using that foam?
No.
Okay, so that's what I'm asking
No, we're not
you.
gonna-
Will you accept that type of foam that has?
I guess I was mistaken that you're saying PFAS. Sounds almost the same as PFAS, but no, we will not accept that, ma'am.
Okay.
The industry is moving away from that. As a matter of fact, most of the industry does not use PFAS anymore. They all moving towards PFAS.
So the question was, will you accept it? And you said no. Okay, so I just wanted to make
PFAS.
perfluorooctane sulfonic acid.
We will accept the PFAS, the shorter
Okay.
chain one.
So do you have procedures in place? So for the fire department, are there procedures in place to ensure that that you're not going to be accepting donations of foam that contains this PFOS?
We don't have any set procedures, but with this movement, of course, we would be checking on it. We would ask for the material safety data sheets. We would talk to our partners that are out there. And as a result of the emergence of the emerging concern, the critical concern, we will take that into consideration, and we will not accept PFOS, the PFOS, and we would accept what the industry has out there that's determined that is the safest using best management practices.
Okay. So just to reiterate, you currently don't have any of
We do
this
not have any foam at all.
AFFF foam
We have no foam at all
on
in stock
Okay.
on inventory.
Do you know, to your knowledge, historically, has Guam Fire Department have this firefighting foam? Did they use this firefighting foam?
Yes, ma'am. We've used foam in the past for major hydrocarbon fires at the Port Authority of Guam and in many other places on Guam throughout the history, in my 29-year history in the Guam Fire Department.
Is there any record of how much was released?
Beg your pardon?
Is there a record of how much was released of that firefighting foam?
We don't have a record of exactly how much was used.
Okay. And so just to reiterate, what vicinities did they use it? You said the Port Authority was one.
We've used them for major fires that involve gas leak, gas spills, and things of that nature.
Okay.
Mostly fuel.
And can you identify locations where it was used? Or
I
if
can
that's something-
identify some, but not all. For example, like the Port Authority, gas stations, and things of that nature.
Okay. Does Guam Fire Department have any procedures to manage it, like contain it?
Yes,
even
ma'am.
minimize its use? Are there procedures currently?
Okay, you combine a couple questions. I'll answer one at a time. The major way for minimizing the spread of any type of foam, which is basically it's combined with minimizing the spread of any fuel. When we deploy the use of foam, and we use portable dikes, basically like snakes. So we spread out the snakes around, and that's also not only to contain the foam, but also to contain the actual fuel that may be spilling. And most of the industry, when it comes to fuel, because of fire code requirements, it also requires secondary containment. So that also helps out. So after the deployment of foam, whether it's deployed or not, we would actually require that they do proper cleanup procedures using an approved environmental cleanup company.
And do you know how it's disposed of? Where is it disposed once it's cleaned up?
In most cases, they probably try their best to clean up as much as they can. Based on my research, my recent research, the PFAS, they're pretty much the most effective way of disposing of PFAS is through the use of an incinerator, and much of that discussion was covered already in terms of proper disposal.
Okay, thank you. No further questions. Do you have any questions? Thank you so much for being able to be here and to be able to respond on behalf
Thank you very much, ma'am.
of the Guam Fire Department. So this concludes our informational hearing. The time is now 1:25. There are no further questions. The Committee on Environment, Revenue, and Taxation and Procurement is now adjourned.